Welcome to the English Story Channel, a place to learn English and practice English. Please subscribe to the channel to watch our great videos. Albert Einstein, The Complete Life Story. A mind that changed the universe. Albert Einstein's name has become a symbol of intelligence, creativity, and scientific revolution. Today his face appears on posters, books, documentaries, classrooms, and even memes. But long before he became the father of modern physics, Einstein was simply a curious child, slow to speak, misunderstood by teachers, and often lost in his own thoughts. He was not born a genius. He became one through relentless curiosity, deep imagination, and an unshakable desire to understand the universe. This is the true, unembellished story of Albert Einstein's life. Beginning from his earliest childhood moments in Germany, following his struggles with school, his rise as a revolutionary thinker, and the discoveries that forever changed human understanding of time, space, energy, and reality itself. This is the story of how an ordinary child became an extraordinary mind. The Birth of a Quiet Child, 1879. Albert Einstein was born on March 14, 1879, in the city of Ulm, located in the Kingdom of Württemberg in the German Empire. His family was Jewish, though not religiously strict. His father, Hermann Einstein, was an engineer and entrepreneur who worked with electrical equipment. His mother, Pauline Koch, was a cultured woman who loved music, especially the violin, and played an important role in shaping her son's artistic and intellectual world. Albert's birth was normal, but there was an unusual detail the family remembered. His head was slightly larger than average. Doctors assured them it was nothing serious, and they were right. But it became a small myth within the family, often retold with amusement. When Albert was still an infant, the family moved to Munich, a larger and more modern city. Hermann and Pauline opened a small company called Elektrotechnische Fabrik J. Einstein and C., which produced electrical equipment based on direct current technology. Little did they know their quiet son would one day revolutionize the understanding of electricity, light, and energy far beyond anything they could imagine. The child who spoke late. One of the most repeated facts about Einstein's childhood is that he spoke very slowly. He barely said a word during his first 3 years. Some family members even suspected he had a learning disability. His parents worried, but he eventually began to speak, carefully, slowly, and thoughtfully. He often repeated sentences to himself until he felt they were perfect. This peculiar habit made him seem strange to relatives and neighbors. Years later, many psychologists would call this pattern the Einstein syndrome, a term used for highly intelligent children who begin speaking later than usual. Einstein himself admitted, "My parents were worried because I did not speak until I was 4." But his slow speech had a hidden advantage. He learned to think deeply, not superficially. He did not talk until he had a clear idea. This habit stayed with him for life. The first spark of wonder. The magnetic compass. When Einstein was 5 years old, he experienced a moment that would change his life forever. One day when he was sick in bed, his father brought him a simple object, a magnetic compass. It was nothing special, a small glass case with a needle that always pointed north. But to young Einstein, it was a miracle. He later wrote, "I trembled with excitement. Something deeply hidden had to be behind things." He noticed that no matter how he turned the compass, the needle always returned to point in the same direction. It was as if an invisible force guided it. How could something invisible control something physical? This question ignited a fire inside him, a desire to understand fundamental forces that shape reality. The compass was not merely a toy, it was the first clue in his lifelong journey toward uncovering the laws of the universe. A boy who loved numbers and music. While Einstein struggled with language, he excelled at numbers. When he was only 12, he discovered a book that changed everything, Euclid's Elements. He called it his holy little geometry book. He devoured it. Line by line, proof by proof, he taught himself geometry, algebra, and soon calculus. By the time he was 15, he was confident in his understanding of integral and differential calculus, subjects many students learn much later. At the same time, music became his sanctuary. He started learning the violin at age 6. At first, he disliked practice, But by his teenage years, he fell deeply in love with Mozart's compositions. He later said, "The theory of relativity occurred to me by intuition, and music is the driving force behind this intuition." For Einstein, music and mathematics formed a single language, patterns, harmonies, and structures that revealed beauty in both nature and human thought. School troubles, a free mind in a strict system. Despite his brilliance, Einstein did not do well in traditional schools. Why? Because he hated rigid discipline, memorization, blind obedience, strict teachers who punished curiosity. Germany's education system at the time emphasized military-style order. Students had to sit straight, memorize facts, and rarely question teachers. Einstein refused to follow blindly. He was independent, curious, and often challenged the ideas presented in class. One teacher even said, "Einstein will never amount to anything." Another famously told him, "Your mere presence undermines the class's respect for me." Einstein did well in subjects he loved, math and physics, but struggled in others, especially languages. At home, however, he devoured books far beyond his grade level, including philosophy, science, and mathematics. His mind simply did not fit inside the boundaries of formal education. Leaving school and starting over, age 15. At age 15, Einstein's father's business failed because direct current, DC technology, lost the battle to alternating current, AC. The family moved to Italy for better opportunities. Albert initially stayed behind to finish school in Munich, but he was miserable. He felt trapped in a system that suffocated his creativity. So he made a bold move. He left school without graduating. He traveled alone to join his family in Italy. His parents were shocked but eventually supported him. Einstein promised he would continue studying on his own, and he did. He read textbooks, practiced mathematics, and built his own curriculum. His self-learning skills would become one of his greatest strengths. Later he said, "School failed me, and I failed the school." But he never failed knowledge. A second chance, Switzerland and new horizons. Einstein decided he wanted to study in Switzerland, which had a more open and liberal education system. He applied to the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School, ETH Zurich. He passed the math and physics portions easily, but failed the humanities. Still, the school recognized his talent and allowed him to attend a preparatory school in Aarau. There, Einstein met teachers who encouraged creativity and critical thinking. For the first time, he felt understood. The headmaster, Jost Winteler, inspired him greatly and even invited him to live with his family. Einstein later called these some of the happiest days of his youth. He eventually passed the entrance exam and entered ETH Zurich in 1896 at the age of 17. University life and first love at ETH, Einstein studied under famous physicists like Heinrich Weber. He was brilliant but rebellious, often skipping classes to study independently. He preferred libraries and long walks in nature over lecture halls. There he met Mileva Marić, a Serbian physics student. She was one of the few women in the program. Einstein admired her intelligence and determination. Their friendship grew into love. Together they studied Maxwell's equations, advanced mathematics, physics journals, theories of light. Mileva challenged him intellectually in ways few people ever could. Their relationship was intense, complicated, and historically debated, but undeniably meaningful to Einstein's early scientific development. Graduation and unemployment. Einstein graduated in 1900 with good grades, but his reputation for skipping classes and questioning professors worked against him. No professor wanted him as an assistant. No university offered him a research position. Einstein found himself unemployed, frustrated, and nearly broke. He applied everywhere, even for teaching jobs in high schools, but received rejection after rejection. Mileva also faced challenges, failing her final exams and losing her chance for a diploma. Einstein fell into despair, but never gave up. His passion for physics continued burning. He spent long nights studying and writing scientific ideas no one else saw. Finally, a small miracle happened. His friend Marcel Grossmann recommended him for a job at the Swiss Patent Office. It would become the most important opportunity of Einstein's life. The Patent Office, a laboratory of ideas. In 1902, Einstein became a technical expert third class at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. The job paid well enough and gave him time to think. His task was simple: read inventions, analyze them, and decide whether they were truly original. But the quiet office environment allowed him to conduct thought experiments, mental simulations that allowed him to imagine riding light beams, bending space, and challenging the foundations of physics. He called the patent office my worldy cloister where I hatch my most beautiful ideas. And indeed, what would happen next is one of the most spectacular achievements in scientific history. Albert Einstein, The Complete Life Story. The Miracle Year, Annus Mirabilis, 1905. A life of routine, a mind of revolution. By the early 1900s, Albert Einstein was living what appeared to be an ordinary, quiet life. He worked full-time at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern, reviewing technical documents and evaluating inventions. To the outside world, he was a young man with an unremarkable job, a modest apartment, and no academic title. Yet inside his mind, storms of ideas raged with intensity. Every lunchtime, Einstein would join colleagues at a cafe near the patent office, where he passionately debated physics, philosophy, and mathematics. He spoke about problems that few around him fully understood: the nature of light, the meaning of time, the structure of matter, and the limitations of Isaac Newton's long-accepted mechanics. In the evenings after work, Einstein returned home to his notebooks. He would sit at a small wooden desk in his cramped apartment with a cup of tea and endless sheets of scribbled equations. Outside, the world saw routine. Inside his mind, the universe was unfolding. He later wrote, "There was a spirit of rebellion in me, and I allowed myself to think differently." He was preparing quietly, unknowingly, for the most extraordinary year in the history of science. The year everything changed in 1905, Einstein was just 26 years old. He was still a patent clerk. He had no doctorate yet. He had no laboratory, no team, no university funding. Yet in that single year, working alone, he published 4 scientific papers that transformed physics forever. Historians call it his Annus Mirabilis, his miracle year. These 4 papers appeared in the journal Annalen der Physik, one of the most respected scientific journals of the time. Each paper addressed a different mystery of the universe: the photoelectric effect, Brownian motion, special relativity, mass-energy equivalence, E-MAR MC2. Together, these papers reshaped physics, destroyed old assumptions, and laid the foundation for modern science and technology. Let us explore each one. The photoelectric effect. Light as particles. The discovery that won Einstein the Nobel Prize in 1921. At the beginning of the 20th century, scientists believed light behaved only like a wave. This idea worked for many experiments, but something puzzled physicists. When light hit metal, it could knock electrons out of the surface. This was the photoelectric effect. But the strange part? Increasing the brightness of light did not free more electrons. Increasing the frequency of light did. This made no sense under classical physics. Einstein proposed a bold idea. Light is made of small packets of energy quanta. These tiny packets later became known as photons. This simple but revolutionary idea explained the photoelectric effect, laid the foundation for quantum mechanics, directly led to solar panels, lasers, sensors, and modern electronics. Because this discovery was so groundbreaking and controversial, the Nobel Committee awarded him the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1921, not for relativity, but for this paper. It is one of the most important works in the history of science. Brownian motion, proving atoms exist. At the time Einstein was writing, many scientists still doubted the existence of atoms. It seems strange today, but in 1905, atoms were still considered a theoretical idea, not directly proven. Einstein studied a phenomenon called Brownian motion, the random movement of pollen grains floating in water, first observed by Robert Brown in 1827. Einstein realized this jittery, unpredictable movement could be mathematically explained if the grains were being constantly hit by invisible molecules. His paper showed atoms must exist. Molecules collide randomly with particles. The physical world is built from discrete units of matter. This discovery finally convinced the scientific community that atoms were not just a theory, they were real. Today, chemistry, biology, and physics depend on this truth. Einstein's second paper changed the way humanity understood matter itself. Special relativity, redefining time and space. Einstein's third paper from 1905 was even more radical. It challenged ideas that had been accepted since Isaac Newton. Newton believed time was absolute, space was absolute. Both were fixed, unchanging backgrounds. Einstein asked a question no one else dared to ask. What if time and space are not absolute? He realized the speed of light is constant for everyone. Time is not the same for everyone. The faster something moves, the more time slows down for it. Space and time are connected as a single fabric. Space-time. This became the theory of special relativity. Its consequences are extraordinary. Clocks run slower at high speeds. Moving objects shorten, Lorentz contraction. Simultaneity is relative. Nothing can move faster than light. Einstein had rewritten the rules of the universe. Modern technologies like GPS satellites, particle accelerators, nuclear energy, cosmology would not exist without this theory. In a letter that year, Einstein wrote to his friend, "It is a storm sweeping through physics." He was right. E creme C2, the most famous equation in history. Einstein's final paper of 1905 was only a few pages long, but it contained one of the universe's most powerful truths. He showed that mass and energy are two forms of the same thing. His equation, E mc2, energy mass x, speed of light, revealed that a tiny amount of mass contains enormous energy. Energy can transform into matter. Matter can transform into energy. This explains nuclear fusion in stars, nuclear power, atomic bombs, though Einstein later regretted the consequences. The birth of the universe in the Big Bang. Einstein did not create nuclear weapons. He simply revealed the relationship between mass and energy. His equation is a cornerstone of modern physics. The world reacts or ignores. You might think Einstein's groundbreaking papers made him instantly famous. They did not. In fact, many scientists didn't read his papers, didn't understand them, or didn't believe them. Einstein was still a patent clerk without a PhD, without a university position, barely known outside small physics circles. But over time, leading scientists began to realize the importance of his work. Letters arrived from universities. Invitations to conferences appeared. Some physicists, like Max Planck, became early supporters and helped spread Einstein's ideas throughout Europe. The world was slowly waking up to the genius hidden in the patent office. Earning a doctorate and becoming a professor, 1906-1909. Einstein earned his PhD from the University of Zurich in 1905, shortly after publishing his miracle papers. His dissertation was modest and not as revolutionary as his other works, but it fulfilled the requirement. Then in 1908, he finally received his first academic position, lecturer at the University of Bern. He continued to work at the patent office for a while, balancing teaching and scientific research. But by 1909, Einstein's reputation had grown enough that he was offered a professorship at the University of Zurich. He accepted and left the patent office forever. His wife Mileva once said, "Physics was his life. The patent office was only a place he passed through." Einstein was no longer an unknown clerk. He was emerging as one of the greatest thinkers of the century. Fame, friendship, and intellectual adventure. As Einstein's fame grew, he formed friendships with other brilliant minds. Max Planck, Hermann Minkowski, Marcel Grossmann, Michel Besso-Minkowski, Einstein's former math professor, expanded on special relativity by introducing the idea of four-dimensional space, time. He said, henceforth, space by itself and time by itself are doomed to fade away. Einstein initially resisted the mathematical formalism, but later accepted it as essential for his next major breakthrough. He was now preparing for a new revolution, one that would take another decade to complete. The road to general relativity, 1909-1915, Einstein began working on a more complete theory of relativity, one that could describe gravity, accelerated motion, and the behavior of the universe on the largest scales. He knew Newton's laws worked well, but contained flaws, especially with gravity. Newton described gravity as a force acting at a distance, but Einstein believed nature worked differently. He asked a simple but profound question. What if gravity is not a force at all? This line of thinking led him to imagine, a person in free fall feels weightless. Gravity and acceleration might be equivalent. Massive objects bend space-time, but developing the full theory required mathematics far beyond Einstein's training. Fortunately, his friend Marcel Grossmann, a mathematician, helped him study advanced geometry needed for the theory. Einstein worked tirelessly for years, making mistakes, doubting himself, correcting errors, and pushing forward relentlessly. He later said, "My life was divided between science and pain." But he did not give up. And in 1915, after years of struggle, he completed one of the greatest scientific achievements of all time, the general theory of relativity. But that chapter belongs to part 3, the crisis of gravity. By 1910, Albert Einstein had achieved more in 5 years than most scientists accomplished in a lifetime. His miracle year had shaken the foundations of physics, and the world was slowly beginning to recognize his brilliance. Yet, Einstein himself felt unsatisfied. Special relativity was powerful but incomplete. It could describe objects moving at constant speeds, but it failed to explain gravity, the most familiar yet mysterious force of all. Newton had declared that gravity was a force acting between masses. For centuries, this idea had worked well enough to predict the motion of planets, the fall of apples, and the tides of the sea. But Einstein sensed something deeper. He wrote to a colleague, "Newton, forgive me. You found the only way possible in your age. But now the time has come to look at gravity differently." Einstein believed nature was far more elegant than an invisible force reaching mysteriously across space. He believed gravity must arise from something physical, something geometric, something woven into the fabric of the universe itself. Thus began one of the hardest scientific journeys in history. The equivalence principle, a moment of genius. In 1907, Einstein experienced what he later called the happiest thought of my life. He imagined a man falling off a roof. As he fell, the man would feel weightless. Everything around him, his tools, his hat, even his keys, would float beside him. Einstein realized something profound. Gravity disappears in free fall. This meant that gravity wasn't like other forces. It was fundamentally connected to acceleration. From this idea, Einstein developed his famous equivalence principle. Gravity and acceleration are indistinguishable. This principle became the key to unlocking a new understanding of the universe. Einstein wrote, "The gravitational field has only a relative existence. In a freely falling elevator, it disappears." This simple thought experiment would eventually lead to the most beautiful theory in the history of physics, general relativity. The mathematical mountain. Einstein now knew the direction of his theory, but the journey ahead was steep. To describe gravity as the geometry of space and time, he needed sophisticated tools, far beyond the mathematics he had learned as a student. He turned to his former classmate and friend, Marcel Grossmann, a brilliant mathematician. Grossmann introduced him to tensor calculus, a powerful framework for describing curved surfaces and multidimensional geometry. Einstein later admitted, "Grossmann saved me." Together, they worked to develop the mathematical foundation for a universe where matter bends space-time and curved space-time guides the motion of matter. But the equations were incredibly difficult. Einstein spent years wrestling with calculations, making progress one month and losing it the next. Many nights he worked past dawn, driven by intuition but exhausted by complexity. He confessed to a friend, "I have become a kind of mathematical hermit." Still, he refused to give up. War, struggle, and breakthrough. By 1914, Einstein accepted a prestigious position in Berlin. His marriage to Mileva Maric was collapsing, Europe was falling into World War I, and Einstein was isolated, emotionally and professionally. Yet in the middle of this turmoil, he made the final push. For months, he corrected mistakes, tested equations, and rewrote entire sections of his theory. He walked alone through the streets of Berlin, murmuring to himself, working out problems in his head. Then in November 1915, he stood before the Prussian Academy of Sciences and presented the final form of his equations. the general theory of relativity. His revolutionary idea, gravity is not a force. It is the curvature of space-time caused by mass and energy. Planets do not feel a force pulling them. They simply follow the curves of space-time. It was elegant. It was beautiful. It was correct. Einstein later reflected, "My boldest dreams have come true." But the world had not yet noticed. That would soon change. A solar eclipse in global fame. Einstein's new theory made a bold prediction. Light should bend when passing near a massive object like the sun. To test this, astronomers needed a solar eclipse, one rare enough to reveal stars near the sun's edge. In 1919, British astronomer Sir Arthur Eddington embarked on an expedition to observe such an eclipse. Despite clouds, equipment failures, and wartime difficulties, Eddington succeeded. The photographs showed that the stars near the sun's edge appeared displaced, just as Einstein's equations predicted. On November 7, 1919, newspapers around the world exploded with headlines: "Einstein theory triumphs, lights all askew in the heavens, revolution in science." Einstein awoke that morning as a scientist. He went to bed that night a global superstar. He later joked, "If my theory had been proven wrong, the Germans would say I was Swiss, and the Swiss would say I was German." But it had been proven right, and Einstein's fame became unstoppable. A celebrity scientist, 1920-1921, Einstein became one of the most recognizable faces in the world. His hair, wild and untamed, became an icon. Crowds gathered wherever he appeared. Lectures sold out instantly, even when nobody understood the mathematics. He appeared in newspapers, magazines, and political speeches. Admirers wrote him letters. Journalists chased him. But Einstein remained humble, often amused by the attention. He once said, "I am no Einstein." He disliked the spotlight, preferring quiet evenings with friends, long walks, and playing the violin. Yet he used his fame for good speaking publicly against nationalism, militarism, and anti-Semitism, which were growing in post-war Europe. His courage made him beloved to many and hated by others. The Nobel Prize at last, 1921. Despite his world-changing theories, Einstein still had not won the Nobel Prize. Many physicists were skeptical of relativity, while others struggled to understand it. The Nobel Committee was cautious, often conservative, and deeply divided about Einstein's ideas. Then in 1921, after years of debate, Einstein finally received the prize, but not for relativity. He received the Nobel Prize in Physics for his explanation of the photoelectric effect. The citation avoided relativity entirely, but Einstein didn't mind. He celebrated quietly and used the prize money to support his family, especially his ex-wife Mileva and their sons. He later laughed. "The photoelectric effect was the least revolutionary of all my works. Yet it was the one that changed modern technology forever." America discovers Einstein. In 1921, Einstein traveled to the United States for the first time. Crowds greeted him like a visiting king. Reporters followed him everywhere. Students climbed windows just to see him walk through a hallway. He visited universities, synagogues, laboratories, and even the White House. America admired him not just as a scientist, but as a symbol of genius, peace, humanitarian values. Einstein fell in love with the country's openness and energy. Although he didn't know it then, America would one day become his permanent home. For now, he returned to Europe, a hero. A time of discovery and responsibility. Throughout the early 1920s, Einstein continued to expand his theories. He explored cosmology, the shape of the universe, and the possibility of gravitational waves, ideas confirmed by scientists many decades later. He also devoted enormous energy to social issues, promoting peace, supporting Jewish communities in Europe, speaking against racism, helping establish the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He said, "I belong to no country. My country is the world, and my religion is doing good." But trouble was coming. Dark forces were rising in Germany, and Einstein's fame in Jewish identity would make him a target. The shadow of danger. By the mid-1920s, Einstein sensed political danger growing around him. Nationalism, anti-Semitism, rising extremist groups, violent political rhetoric. His outspoken views on peace made him unpopular with militarists. His Jewish heritage made him a target of hate movements. His scientific success made him a symbol for those who despised intellectuals. Some newspapers attacked him. Others called relativity an international conspiracy. Einstein remained calm, but he understood the risk. He once said, "If I were to remain silent, I would feel guilty." Little by little, he became not only a scientist, but a moral voice. And that voice would soon be tested in the most dramatic way. A world turning dark by the mid-1920s, Albert Einstein was at the height of global fame. Crowds filled auditoriums just to see him walk across the stage. His theories influenced physics, philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, and even art. Yet beneath the applause, a dark tide was rising in Europe. Germany, still wounded after World War I, had become a breeding ground for extremism. Political groups blamed Jews for economic problems. Nationalists accused pacifists like Einstein of weakening the nation. Newspapers spreading hatred had started to mention his name with venom. Einstein sensed the danger long before many around him. He later wrote, "Nationalism is an infantile disease. It is the measles of mankind." But the disease was spreading, and Einstein's conscience compelled him to speak out. A target of hate. By 1925, Einstein was openly advocating for peace and speaking out against rising militarism. He criticized political violence, racism, and the growing influence of extremist groups. This made him enemies. Newspapers controlled by far-right groups called him a traitor, an enemy of Germany, a corrupting influence, a symbol of Jewish science. Pamphlets circulated with his face crossed out. Posters urged Germans to reject the foreign ideas of relativity. The attacks were not about physics, they were about identity, hatred, and fear. Still, Einstein refused to remain silent. "The world is a dangerous place," he said, "not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing." His courage only intensified the hostility against him. World recognition, local hostility. Even as parts of Germany turned against him, the world embraced Einstein more strongly than ever. He received countless invitations to travel. Lectures in London, speeches in Paris, expeditions in Japan, ceremonies in the United States, honorary degrees around the world in Japan. He was welcomed by thousands who lined the streets. In France, scientists who had fought Germany in the war proudly shook his hand. In America, he was treated like a visiting king. Yet every time Einstein returned to Berlin, he felt the growing chill of hatred. His home was watched by extremist groups. His mail was sometimes intercepted. Friends warned him of assassination attempts. Still, he continued working, convinced that science and humanity were stronger than fear. For a while, he was right, but the darkness was getting closer. The rise of Hitler. By the early 1930s, Germany was in crisis. Unemployment was massive, inflation had destroyed savings, distrust in government ran deep. Extremist parties gained support. Adolf Hitler, leader of the Nazi Party, used anger and fear to rise to power. His speeches targeted Jews, intellectuals, and pacifists. Everything Einstein represented became an enemy of Nazi ideology. When Hitler became chancellor in January 1933, the atmosphere changed overnight. Book burnings began. Jewish professors were fired. Scientists who supported Einstein were silenced. Einstein's works were banned as harmful. One newspaper headline read, "If we catch Einstein, we will hang him." Another published a list of enemies with rewards offered for their deaths. Einstein's name was at the top. The message could not have been clearer. Einstein could no longer stay. Leaving Germany forever in March 1933, Einstein left Germany to give a lecture in the United States. While he was traveling, Nazi agents raided his summer home near Berlin. They confiscated his property, seized his bank accounts, and threatened his colleagues. Einstein realized that Germany was no longer safe. On March 28, 1933, he went to the German consulate in Belgium and took one powerful step. He renounced his German citizenship. He returned his passport and declared he would never again live in a country that persecuted people for their identity. The Nazi government responded by putting a bounty on his head. His house was turned into a Hitler youth camp. Posters labeled him an enemy of the nation. Einstein became a man without a country, but not without hope. He still believed humanity could choose a better path. A temporary home in Europe. Einstein sought safety in Europe before deciding where to resettle permanently. He spent time in Belgium, the United Kingdom, Switzerland, and England. He stayed at the home of British naval officer Oliver Locker-Lamson, who guarded him with armed patrols due to assassination threats. Einstein continued writing, lecturing, and advocating for peace. He met with politicians, scientists, and activists, urging the world to speak out against the rising threat of fascism. But even in these safe havens, he felt hunted. When asked why he continued to speak out, he said, "I cannot remain silent in the face of evil." He needed a country where he could work freely, without fear. The answer would come from across the Atlantic. The call to America. In 1933, Einstein received a formal invitation from the Institute for Advanced Study, IAS, in Princeton, New Jersey. The institute offered him a lifetime position, complete freedom of research, no teaching responsibilities, a safe, welcoming environment. The famous mathematician Abraham Flexner and wealthy philanthropist Louis Bamberger founded the IAS to support great thinkers in times of crisis. They wanted Einstein not merely as a scientist, but as a symbol of intellectual freedom. Einstein accepted. On October 17, 1933, Albert Einstein arrived in the United States as a refugee, greeted by journalists, photographers, and cheering crowds. He said quietly, "I am grateful to this country for allowing me to live in freedom." America would become his new home, permanently. A new life in Princeton, Einstein settled in a modest house at 112 Mercer Street in Princeton. He liked simplicity and refused luxury. He spent mornings walking to the Institute, often in old sweaters and without socks, greeting people along the way. He became a beloved figure in the town. Children waved at him, neighbors brought him pies, students asked for autographs. Locals protected his privacy. Despite his fame, Einstein lived humbly. He enjoyed sailing, though he was famously bad at it. He played violin to relax. He entertained friends with humor and wit. His colleagues respected him deeply. But Einstein himself said, "I have no special talent. I am only passionately curious." Princeton gave him peace and a place to continue his quest for a deeper understanding of the universe. Rebuilding a life through science. In the United States, Einstein returned to his true passion, theoretical physics. He focused on unified field theory, cosmology, the structure of space-time, the search for fundamental laws of nature. Einstein hoped to combine gravity and electromagnetism into a single framework, a dream that consumed him until his final days. He believed that nature was ultimately simple and elegant, and that all physical phenomena could be unified under one set of equations. Although he never completed the unified field theory, his efforts inspired later generations and opened doors to modern theories like string theory. Einstein remained a pioneer, chasing the unknown with the same curiosity he had as a boy. A voice against tyranny. While building his new scientific life, Einstein also became one of the world's most important humanitarian voices. He spoke against fascism, anti-Semitism, racism, nuclear weapons, violation of human rights. He supported Jewish refugees escaping Europe and used his fame to raise money for those in danger. He wrote to political leaders, urging them to accept refugees. He spoke at universities, warning of the rise of totalitarianism. He helped establish organizations to protect scientists fleeing persecution. He said, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." Einstein refused to do nothing. Hitler's war and a scientist's warning. By the late 1930s, Einstein became increasingly concerned that Germany might develop powerful new weapons using advances in nuclear physics. Although Einstein was a lifelong pacifist, he believed Hitler posed a threat unlike any in history. In 1939, physicists Leo Szilard and Edward Teller approached Einstein with alarming news. Fission of uranium could create an explosive chain reaction. If Germany built such a weapon, the consequences would be catastrophic. Einstein did not support war, but he understood the moral weight of inaction. So on August 2, 1939, he signed a letter to U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt urging the United States to investigate nuclear research. This letter led to the formation of the Manhattan Project, though Einstein himself was not part of it. He later said, "Had I known that the Germans would not succeed in producing an atomic bomb, I would never have lifted a finger." It was one of the deepest regrets of his life. A refugee becomes American. In 1940, Einstein officially became a citizen of the United States. During the ceremony, he raised his right hand and swore allegiance to his new country, though he chose to keep Swiss citizenship as well. America had become the sanctuary where he could think freely, work without fear, and speak with courage. He said, "America is a land where everyone has a chance, a guarantee, but a chance." Einstein used that chance to fight for justice, freedom, and humanity. The next decades of his life would be filled with profound scientific reflection and deep moral responsibility. The world at the edge of catastrophe. By 1939, Albert Einstein had rebuilt his life in the United States after fleeing Nazi Germany. He lived modestly in Princeton, teaching, lecturing, and pursuing his dream of a unified field theory. But outside the quiet streets of New Jersey, the world was sliding into chaos. Hitler had invaded Poland. Europe was at war again. Millions were at risk. Science itself, especially nuclear physics, was entering a dangerous era. Einstein, once a symbol of peace and humanitarian ideals, now faced a moral dilemma unlike any he had ever known. The question was no longer theoretical, it was terrifyingly real. The discovery of nuclear fission. In 1938, German scientists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann discovered nuclear fission, the splitting of the atomic nucleus, releasing enormous energy. Physicists across the world quickly realized the implications. A chain reaction in uranium could produce an explosion of unimaginable scale. Many scientists fled Germany, bringing their knowledge to America. Among them were Leo Szilard, Eugene Wigner, and Edward Teller, all brilliant men, all Jewish refugees like Einstein, all terrified of what Hitler might do with such power. Szilard warned, "If Germany builds this bomb first, civilization may not survive." But Einstein, who had not worked directly in nuclear physics, knew little about the specifics until Szilard approached him. Their meeting changed history. The letter that shook the world. In July 1939, Szilard and Wigner visited Einstein at his cottage on Long Island. They explained the threat. The Nazis might be developing an atomic bomb. The United States was doing almost nothing to prepare. Time was running out. Einstein understood instantly. He had escaped Hitler. Millions had not. Although a lifelong pacifist, he believed Hitler could not be allowed to control a weapon capable of destroying cities. So on August 2, 1939, Einstein signed a letter, drafted by Szilard, addressed to President Franklin D. Roosevelt. It warned, uranium could power a new kind of weapon. Germany was stockpiling uranium. The U.S. must begin research immediately. Roosevelt received the letter on October 11, 1939. It sparked the creation of the Advisory Committee on Uranium, which later evolved into the secret Manhattan Project. Einstein would forever be linked to nuclear weapons, even though he never worked on them. Einstein's anxiety and regret. When Einstein realized the United States had begun serious atomic research, he felt a mixture of relief and dread. Relief because the world might be protected. Dread because he knew the consequences of success. He wrote, "I do not know what weapons will be used in World War III, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones." Throughout the early 1940s, Einstein was not allowed to join the Manhattan Project. The U.S. government considered his political activism and pacifist views a security risk. Ironically, the man whose letter helped spark the program was excluded from the program itself. Einstein later said, "I would not have participated even if they had asked me." He feared what humanity might do with such power. A scientist under FBI surveillance, Einstein's outspoken political opinions, advocacy for civil rights, and involvement with human rights organizations alarmed some in the U.S. government. By 1940, the FBI began monitoring him. J. Edgar Hoover's FBI created a file on Einstein exceeding 1,400 pages, full of surveillance reports, intercepted letters, political suspicions, claims that Einstein was a radical. They even considered deporting him at one point. But despite increasing scrutiny, Einstein continued speaking openly for justice, peace, and human dignity. He said, Blind obedience to authority is the greatest enemy of truth. Even under pressure, Einstein refused to be silenced. The war deepens, and so does Einstein's sorrow. As World War II escalated, Einstein experienced deep emotional turmoil. He watched cities bombed, refugees displaced, Jews exterminated, totalitarianism spreading. Although he was safe in America, he felt profound pain for those still trapped in Europe. He used much of his income to help refugees escape. He wrote visa recommendations, raised money for relief efforts, and hosted newly arrived scientists and families in Princeton. Einstein said, "I cannot enjoy my life when others live in fear." His humanitarian work during these years saved hundreds of lives, an accomplishment rarely mentioned in history books. Scientific work. During war years, even with global conflict raging, Einstein continued to make scientific contributions. He studied gravitational waves, the geometry of the universe, quantum statistics, unified field theory. His Princeton office became a refuge, an island of quiet thought in a world drowning in violence. Einstein often walked the IAS grounds, lost in equations. Students and colleagues saw him as a gentle, absent-minded figure, hair wild, socks forgotten, chalk dust on his sleeves. Yet behind his calm exterior was a man wrestling with moral responsibility. He knew science had opened a door that humanity might not be ready to walk through. The Manhattan Project, a silent shadow. While Einstein continued his theoretical work, the Manhattan Project progressed at lightning speed. Key scientists involved: Robert Oppenheimer, Enrico Fermi, Niels Bohr, Richard Feynman, Hans Bethe. Brilliant minds assembled in secret laboratories to harness Einstein's equation, E-mc2. Even though Einstein had no role in the project, the connection was impossible to ignore. His famous equation proved that energy and mass were interchangeable, a truth that made nuclear weapons possible. Oppenheimer later said, "Einstein unlocked the doorway to the atom, and we walked through it." Einstein never fully accepted this praise. To him, knowledge was neutral. Only human choices gave it moral meaning. The bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. On August 6, 1945, the United States dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima. 3 days later, a second bomb destroyed Nagasaki. Einstein learned the news from the radio. He put his head in his hands and whispered, "Oh my God." He did not cheer. He did not celebrate victory. He mourned. He later said, "I made one great mistake in my life when I signed the letter to President Roosevelt recommending the atomic bomb." Einstein knew his signature had not built the bomb, but he felt responsible for opening the door. His heart broke for the victims, even as he understood the complex moral choices that had led to the bomb's use. After the war, a world forever changed. With World War II over, Einstein turned all his energy toward preventing another global catastrophe. He warned, "The unleashed power of the atom has changed everything except our way of thinking." Einstein became one of the earliest and strongest voices calling for nuclear disarmament, world government, peaceful resolution of conflicts, responsible scientific oversight. He believed humanity needed new institutions to survive in an age where a single bomb could destroy a city. In speeches, he repeated, "We must learn to think in a new way. We must change our hearts or perish." His message was moral, urgent, and rooted in his deep love for humankind. Einstein and civil rights in America. After the war, Einstein expanded his activism beyond global nuclear issues. Living in the United States allowed him to see injustice up close. He became a powerful ally in the early civil rights movement. He spoke publicly against racism, befriended and supported Paul Robeson, joined the NAACP called Segregation, America's Worst Disease, invited black students to Princeton when restaurants refused them service. When asked why he felt so strongly, Einstein replied, "I cannot stand idly by when I see wrong. Silence is complicity." His courage made him a respected figure in the fight for equality, an enemy of authoritarians. The FBI continued watching Einstein throughout the 1940s. Anti-communist groups accused him of being a radical. Senators demanded his arrest. Einstein remained unfazed. He said, Unthinking respect for authority is the greatest enemy of truth. Einstein believed democracy required critical thinking, skepticism, scientific literacy, moral courage. He fought ignorance with education and fear with reason. Through lectures, interviews, and letters, he encouraged Americans to uphold the values of freedom, justice, and fairness. Science, peace, and humanity. By the mid-1940s, Einstein had become more than a scientist. He was a moral philosopher, a humanitarian, and a global icon. Yet he missed the quiet of pure scientific work. He often retreated to his Princeton study, where he scribbled equations on scratch paper, played violin to relax, worked late into the night, pondered the deep geometry of the universe. He continued his quest for a unified field theory, hoping to reveal a deeper order underlying all forces of nature. He never completed it, but the journey shaped modern physics. The pain of responsibility. Einstein never forgave himself fully for the role he played, however indirectly, in the development of nuclear weapons. He wrote, "Had I known the Germans would fail, I would never have lifted a finger." His friends tried to comfort him. Historians defended him. But Einstein carried the weight silently. In private letters, he expressed sorrow for the loss of life, fear for humanity's future, and frustration at the misuse of science. He concluded, "Science can be a blessing or a curse, depending on the hands that wield it." He spent the rest of his life trying to ensure it became a blessing. A new mission for humanity. Einstein now dedicated himself to a singular mission: preventing future wars. He believed international cooperation was essential. Nuclear weapons must be controlled. World peace depended on shared responsibility. He helped create organizations dedicated to diplomacy, scientific cooperation, global disarmament. His speeches called for unity. Peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding. This became the defining message of his later life. A new era of responsibility. After World War II ended in 1945, the world entered a fragile peace. Cities lay in ruins, nations were traumatized, and the memory of nuclear destruction haunted humanity. The Cold War was growing, dividing the globe into two rival powers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Einstein understood immediately, humanity stood at a crossroads. Technology was advancing faster than political wisdom. Atomic weapons had changed warfare forever. Fear, not reason, guided many decisions. Einstein believed scientists had a moral duty to guide the world away from disaster. He wrote, "The release of atomic energy has not created a new problem. It has made more urgent the necessity of solving an existing one." His voice, calm yet urgent, became a global call for responsibility. The fight against nuclear weapons. Einstein quickly emerged as one of the strongest advocates for nuclear disarmament. He warned that no nation could survive a nuclear war, competition in atomic weapons would end civilization, only international cooperation could protect humanity. He joined and supported multiple organizations: the Emergency Committee of Atomic Scientists to educate the public, UNESCO to promote peace through knowledge, federal world government movements to prevent global conflict in speeches. He said, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." And one world or none. Einstein understood that the atomic age required a new way of thinking, one rooted in humanity, empathy, and unity. A champion of civil rights. Einstein's advocacy did not stop with global politics. Living in the United States, he witnessed racial segregation firsthand. He saw black children barred from schools, black scientists denied opportunities, neighborhoods divided by race, racism justified by flawed science. Einstein, a Jewish refugee who had experienced discrimination, felt a deep connection to the civil rights struggle. He became a member of the NAACP, Pursuit of Unified Field Theory. While he spoke boldly on human issues, Einstein never stopped working on science. His greatest scientific obsession in his later years was the unified field theory. His goal was monumental: to unify all forces of nature into a single mathematical framework. He wanted to extend his general theory of relativity to include electromagnetism, the quantum world, the structure of space-time at every scale. Einstein believed deeply in the unity of nature. I cannot believe God plays dice with the universe. His colleagues teased him for resisting quantum mechanics, but Einstein remained convinced the universe was orderly, not random. Every day at Princeton he could be found, scribbling equations on scraps of paper, walking slowly, deep in thought, modifying tensor equations, debating with colleagues, working late into the night. Though he never finished the unified field theory, his work inspired future generations. String theory, quantum gravity, and modern cosmology all trace their roots to his quest. A global voice for compassion. Einstein continued to receive invitations from around the world. He spoke to university graduates, scientists, diplomats, religious leaders, human rights organizations. Everywhere he went, he carried the same message: peace, understanding, and responsibility. Einstein believed people must think beyond nationalism, education must teach empathy, science must serve humanity, leaders must put human life above political victory. He wrote, "Our task must be to free ourselves by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures." The world listened. Even when people couldn't understand his equations, they understood his heart. The quest for peace and global unity. Einstein supported the creation of the United Nations, but he believed it lacked real power. He argued for stronger international law, global cooperation on nuclear issues, scientific advisory councils for world leaders, fair diplomacy between nations. He dreamed of a future where humanity would solve conflicts through sure dialogue, understanding, shared scientific progress, not through violence. He said, "Peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding." This became one of his most famous and enduring quotes. A scientist's search for God. Einstein did not believe in a personal God who intervened in daily life, but he was not an atheist. He believed in cosmic order, the harmony of the universe, the mysterious beauty of nature. He admired the philosophy of Baruch Spinoza, who saw God as the rational structure of reality. Einstein said, "I believe in Spinoza's God, who reveals himself in the harmony of all that exists." To him, science was a path to awe, mathematics revealed cosmic beauty, curiosity was a sacred duty. Einstein felt that discovering the laws of nature was a spiritual experience, one that connected humanity to something greater. Changing the future through education. Einstein championed education throughout his life. He believed schools should encourage creativity, nurture curiosity, avoid strict memorization, promote independent thinking. He once said, "It is a miracle that curiosity survives formal education." In Princeton, he met with students regularly, answering questions with patience and humor. He encouraged young scientists to question assumptions, refuse to be intimidated, search boldly for truth. His teachings inspired countless students who would go on to become leaders in physics, engineering, mathematics, and philosophy. The simplicity of a genius. Despite global fame, Einstein lived simply. He owned no fancy suits, no expensive cars, no luxury furniture. He preferred worn-out sweaters, baggy trousers, uncombed hair, sailing without knowing how to swim, walking instead of driving. Einstein's house on Mercer Street was modest, filled with books, papers, and his cherished violin. He avoided parties, fame, and wealth. He disliked flattery and ceremony. He wanted only quiet, curiosity, meaningful conversations, time to think. His humility made him even more beloved around the world. The world reacts. News of Einstein's death spread globally within hours. Newspapers printed special editions titled, "Einstein dies at 76, Genius of the Century, the man who changed the universe, the light that never fades." People gathered outside Princeton University in silence. Scientists, presidents, poets, teachers, and ordinary citizens mourned him. The world had lost a scientific titan, a humanitarian leader, a moral philosopher, a refugee who became a global symbol of peace. But Einstein's ideas remained alive. His theories were no longer just equations. They were the foundation of modern science. Black holes, gravitational waves, GPS technology, nuclear energy, cosmology, quantum physics. He had reshaped the universe in humanity's eyes, and the world knew it.